Back to Armageddon now, the last chapter before the epilogue, Jerusalem, what now? Dwight Wilson on page 190. The war, that is the 1967 war, the Six-Day War so-called, was offered as a final proof of the legitimacy of the Restoration. A week after the above Christianity Today editorial, the former General Superintendent of the Assemblies of God, Ralph M. Riggs, asked, "Who is the rightful owner of Palestine?" and answered that the war looked like a confirmation that God had given Palestine to the Jews. Moody Monthly responded to the war and the conquest of Jerusalem with a special issue on Israel. In one article, President John F. Walvoord of Dallas Theological Seminary claimed that the occupation of Jerusalem offered proof of the miraculous preservation of the Jews, and he observed, "Surely this is the finger of God, indicating the approaching end of the age." This special issue also offered excerpts from Wilbur M. Smith's new book, The Israeli-Arab Conflict and the Bible, and the preface of which stated, "The Christians believe that the events of these recent days are part of God's plan of the ages." Another article expressed the philosophy of history that God is in control of all events and that the nations are merely a drop in the bucket or dust on the scales. The entire concern was with fulfillment of prophecy and destiny. The issue of the morality of war or the justice of the Israeli attack was not even a consideration. One observer in Jerusalem just a few days prior to the hostilities was the president of the Evangelical Free Church, Arnold T. Olson, whose inexpensive paperback Inside Jerusalem, City of Destiny appeared the following year. Olson spoke of the unification of Jerusalem as the most exciting headline of the war and as a sign of the end. He believed, as his title implied, Jerusalem has a rendezvous with destiny. A special point was made criticizing the extreme Orthodox sect of the Jews, which opposed the establishment of the State of Israel. This view had been reflected by Rabbi Amram Blau, who called the Israeli victory a disaster. And there's a direct quote from Blau. "God promised he will redeem Zion with the Messiah. That redemption is to come in a manner and in circumstances clearly specified in Jewish tradition. The Messiah has not arrived. The specified circumstances do not exist. The creation of an independent Jewish state by men, not God, in his own way, and time, is a grave sin. It is faithlessness." Let me reread that sentence. This is Orthodox Jew Amram Blau on the Six-Day War. The creation of an independent Jewish state by men, not God, in his own way and time, is a grave sin. It is faithlessness. Wilson goes on, Olson found it quite ironic that this group that called themselves the Guardians of the City were fleeing the country in the crisis days just prior to the war, although their refusal to fight was logically consistent with their theological position. He bitingly observed, "It filled me with disgust to note such a display of cowardice and disloyalty." Attitudes toward the war were the subject of a study by Arnold Ages, a professor in the Department of Classics and Romantic Languages at the University of Waterloo. He showed that the fundamentalist literalist churches had become more favorably disposed toward Israel since the Six-Day War, even though earlier studies had revealed such groups to be more anti-Semitic in their attitudes than liberal Christian groups. In contrast to the trend among fundamentalist literalist groups, Ages observed that many of the liberal Christian groups, including the United Church of Canada, have either adopted ambivalent attitudes towards Israel or been openly hostile. Rabbi Mark H. Tannenbaum, National Director of the Interreligious Affairs Department of the American Jewish Committee, spoke of this shift in a Newsweek interview. Quote, "Many liberal Protestant organizations remained silent or took an outright anti-Israel position." In contrast, he happily observed that evangelical Protestants were the first to offer us sympathy during the war. The initial response of the premillenarians is solidified into an enduring disposition in favor of the war and Israel. A 1973 article in Christian Life claimed that the war was a fulfillment of Psalm 83, 1-8, and that the territories conquered, that is Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Old City of Samaria, had been predicted by Obadiah in verses 17-20. Isaiah 19, 1-17 was interpreted as a prophecy of Egypt's economic plight as a result of the war. S. Maxwell Coder, in an article entitled Jerusalem, Key to the Future, emphasized the war's significance. Quote, Gentile times were fulfilled when Gentiles ceased to control Jerusalem in 1967. End of quote. The world, he said, was now in a period of transition, which would bring the time of the Gentiles to its ultimate end. Not all the evangelical press was entirely one-sided. Christianity Today also reported opposing interpretations of the war. James L. Kelso, former moderator of the United Presbyterian Church, informed readers of the atrocities of the Jews. They had looted the YMCA, badly damaged a Lutheran hospital, wrecked an Episcopal boys' school, and shot up an Episcopal girls' school, killing some of the girls. One missionary was quoted as saying that the war was, quote, perhaps the most serious setback that Christendom has had since the fall of Constantinople in 1453. End of quote. Kelso claimed that the first crime of the Zionists was to make the Balfour Declaration apply to all of Palestine, in spite of its specific guarantees to existing non-Jewish communities. Another crime was the Israeli refusal to do anything about the refugee problem. He asked, how can a Christian applaud the murder of a brother Christian by Zionist Jews? And then Riley commented, an equal or even greater horror is that so many Christians applaud crimes against the Arab Muslim. His article reflected the view of many missionaries and scholars who had been in direct contact with Arab Christian communities, but their pleas made little impact on the general premillenarian mindset. More to come. In Jerusalem, what now? I'll put in a link to Carl Olaf Johnson, who wrote the definitive book on the Jehovah's Witnesses' view of the Gentile times. And where did that view come from? He makes the point in the video I'll put on your screen that it has its source about 200 years ago in the writings of a now obscure prophetic teacher called John Aquila Brown. He's the one who first seems to have connected the Gentile times with a period of 2,520 years. See you next time.